My name is Joe DiCola, and the person I chose to talk about on my leadership case is Walt Disney. The reason I chose to talk about him is because the Walt Disney Company has been a huge part of my childhood. I own many animated movies by Disney, and one of my favorite films of all time is The Lion King, of which I own it, its sequels, and I've even seen the Broadway musical of it. Not to mention, one of the things to do on my bucket list is to go to Disney World and see the Animal Kingdom and Epcot, which is something Walt Disney did not live to see completed. Another reason I chose to talk about him is because of the legacy he left behind. The Walt Disney Company is one of the largest multimedia companies in the world, owning various networks such as ABC and ESPN, and other famous companies such as Pixar, the Muppet Studios, and in recent years, Marvel and Lucasfilm. Now I'll share some of his backstory. Walter Elias Disney was born in Chicago, Illinois on December 5th, 1901. He was the second youngest of 5 children, consisting of 4 boys and 1 girl, with his father being Elias Disney, his mother being Flora Call Disney, then with his siblings from oldest to youngest, being Herbert, Raymond, Roy, and Ruth Disney. During his childhood, Walt began to develop an interest in drawing and sold pictures to both friends and family. Walt attended McKinley High School in Chicago, Illinois, where he took drawing and photography classes, and was even involved in his school newspaper as a cartoonist. When Walt was 16 years old, he dropped out of school intending to join the army, but was rejected due to being underage, but he joined the Red Cross in France for about a year. This was one thing that I found interesting about Walt Disney. He would eventually become successful even though he dropped out of school. I also noticed that over the course of the class, we have talked about many successful people who have dropped out of school, such as Steve Jobs. In 1919, Walt would return to the U.S., where he decided to move to Kansas City to begin a career as a newspaper cartoonist. Eventually, Walt and his brother Roy would show their cartoons at the local Kansas City theater under the name Laugh-O-Grams, and they were met with huge success, and Walt would start a company that would continue to work on those types of cartoons. However, in 1923, Walt was forced to declare bankruptcy due to the company starting to collect a tremendous amount of debt. This was something that I found rather interesting with Walt Disney. For most people, declaring bankruptcy would be the end of their livelihoods, as there is very few people who can bounce back from something like that. Walt Disney was one of those people who not only bounced back, but came back stronger than ever. However, it's also worth mentioning that when this happened, it was around the 1920s, and it was still early in Walt's career, as he was around 22 years old when it happened. So this did not affect him as much as it would have today. Several years later, Walt realized that he lost the rights to one of his earlier creations, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, to Charles Mintz, who helped create some of Walt's early work, along with most of his employees. This was something else that I found interesting about Walt Disney. Even though someone who worked for him took one of his creations and many of his employees, this did not stop Walt from pursuing his dreams. It is worth noting, however, that the Disney Company would regain the rights to Oswald in 2006 in a trade with Universal Studios for Al Michaels. It was there that Walt, along with his brother Roy and co-worker Iwerks, who stayed with them, decided that they would create cartoons around a character that Walt had been working on, which was Mickey Mouse. The first 2 cartoons featuring Mickey were unable to find anyone wanting to distribute them due to them being silent cartoons. It was then that sound was introduced along with the iconic cartoon Steamboat Willie. Walt would then create the Silly Symphonies cartoons, which would create more iconic characters, and one of the cartoons, called Flowers and Trees, was the first one to win an Oscar and the first cartoon to be made in color. It was then on December 21st, 1937, that Walt would premiere his first animated film, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. The film would turn out to be a major success even during the Great Depression, grossing over $1.4 million and winning 8 Oscars. After making 4 more animated films with varying success, Walt and his company suffered its first setback. There was an animator strike during 1941 which made many employees quit, and it would take a long time for the company to recover. Due to this, Walt and the company had to make package films, which were basically a group of 2 or more short cartoons put together or to run the same length of a normal animated film. In addition to the package films, because of World War II, who also had to make propaganda cartoons in order to help support the U.S.'s involvement in the war. The company would continue to do this until 1950, where Walt would return to making full-length animated films, starting with Cinderella. During the final years leading up to Walt's death, Disneyland was already finished, and he was developing plans for Epcot in Florida. In 1966, Walt was diagnosed with lung cancer, and then died on December 15th of the same year, at the age of 65. Also, the last film that was produced under Walt himself was The Jungle Book, though he died during production and was released a year after Walt's death. Although Walt died before he could see Epcot finished, his brother Roy picked up where Walt left off with the plans, and in 1971, Epcot was finished along with the rest of the theme park, Walt Disney World. Now I'll talk about some of the leadership qualities people can learn from Walt Disney. A quality that Walt Disney had and that other leaders can learn from is to have a vision. By that I mean a personage that appears vividly in one's mind. According to Walt, I dream. If we don't dream or desire to have a vision for something better for ourselves or others, then what is it that gets us out of bed every morning? Even if a person's goals are not big or long-term, having a desire can help people keep going even if the road ahead is long and hard. It's also important to make sure that your dreams are in line with the rest of your life. As Walt states, he tests his dreams against his beliefs to make sure that they are in line with his values. There are risks that come with having a vision, and some leaders are not willing to risk anything major, but Walt always dared himself to take risks. Another leadership quality that can be learned from Walt Disney is to bring positive energies to the workplace. According to some of Walt's early employees, he would demonstrate ideas for upcoming films. What I mean is that he would act out the entire movie to show how he wants the story to go and give the artist a sense of direction in terms of what to draw. By doing this, he brought his stories to life, which is a lot livelier and interesting compared to just discussing ideas in a normal meeting. Walt's out-of-the-box methods show that not everyone has to follow the status quo in pitching ideas. This is similar to Steve Jobs, where he participated in freewheeling and encouraged his employees to participate because he hated traditional meetings. Both men show that doing things out of the ordinary when showing an idea is a definite way you can earn the attention of both employees and higher-ups and get your ideas through much clearer compared to just traditional means. The next quality that people can learn from Walt Disney is being a salesman. While having dreams and goals are fine, it takes a lot of resources to make them happen. Walt Disney was known to be one of the greatest salesmen who ever lived and had 5 characteristics of a salesman. The first characteristic is honesty. Being honest about your ideas and what you're trying to sell are important because if you try to lie about your ideas, it'll come back to haunt you later. The second characteristic is having enthusiasm. Having enthusiasm for a long period of time can be challenging since there are many things that can happen to put someone in a bad mood. But if you want to make your goal or dream happen, you and those around you have to be enthusiastic about it. The third characteristic is confidence. For a person to be a leader, they must be confident enough to do the work themselves. Not only must a leader have confidence in their own abilities, but they also must be the kind of leader that inspires confidence in other people. The fourth characteristic is courage. Some people are afraid of pursuing their dreams due to the difficulty that comes with it. But a leader must have courage to step into the unknown and face any challenge that comes their way. As Walt Disney says, it takes people to make a dream a reality. The final characteristic is persistence, which is key to making long-term goals happen. Leaders cannot let any negative criticism and getting rejected deter them. A leader must learn from their mistakes and press on. The next leadership quality that people can learn from Walt Disney is the ability to create partnerships. It goes without saying that making partners is not only essential to leaders, but business in general. If you can make the right partnership with the right people or company, not only will both parties benefit greatly, the partnership will be guaranteed to last longer. For Walt, he had his brother Roy, who is an experienced financial advisor, who played off Walt very well. What this shows is that sometimes the best partners can be found within your own family. The final leadership quality that can be learned from Walt Disney is being able to serve others. Sometimes the line between a leader and a boss is often blurred, and people think they're one and the same. Walt has always been a leader, not a boss. An example of this is when he told a producer who was yelling at a gardener for a mistake to never treat an employee like that. Aside from the boss difference, Walt's ability to serve others knew no limit and just felt more like generosity than anything else. An example of this is when Walt paid for his secretary's entire wedding and even walked her down the aisle. In conclusion, it's hard to deny that Walt Disney has left a great impact on the world. From simple beginnings to his time at Red Cross, and then rising to become one of the greatest animators who ever lived. He also had many people who helped him throughout his life and career, such as his brother Roy. The qualities he possessed as a leader are some you do not see very often, and I was surprised to how much depth Walt had with them. Walt Disney was also the type of leader who never let setbacks weigh him down, and always found a way to pick himself up and come back stronger.